Are you ready to navigate the new way to work? Forbes Books presents Dare to Care in the Workplace with Kathleen Quinn Botaw. Here's Kathleen.
My guest this week is Dee Ann Turner. Her impressive career started at Chick-fil-A more than 30 years ago. Dee Ann went on to become the company's first female officer when she was named Vice President of Talent in 2001. Now she's on a mission to help leaders find and keep extraordinary talent and teaching talent how to be extraordinary. Dee Ann, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kathleen. It's great to be with you today.
Wonderful to be with you too. And, we were just chatting before we started. I missed you at Influence 2022, which for our listeners is where all the speaker people go once a year. So I wanted to kick this off with, how did it feel and what was your experience speaking to 1,000 speakers at Influence 2022? And what was your key message for them?
That's funny that you should mention that, because I speak a lot now, about 50 times a year, and I usually don't get nervous anymore. I get pretty amped up to be on stage, and I enjoy connecting with audiences, but I was nervous about this one. And it was to be in a room full of professional speakers that have been doing it probably longer than I have professionally. Was a little bit intimidating, to say the least, but it was a pleasure to be there with Nito Quabain. And Dr. Quabain, I'm enjoying serving as a talent expert in residence at High Point University. And so it's always fun when you get to interview with him. And so we basically talked about my expertise around talent and culture, which both of those are really hot topics in the marketplace right now with everything that's going on with the Great Resignation and so much upside down in that world right now.
That's so great. What was your key message? Because, I was a little nervous just attending. I can't even imagine how nervous you were speaking. What was your key message to us, the speaker audience?
I think the biggest question people had on their minds from me is, what do we do? How do we find the talent? There's no talent available. What do we do? And one of the things that I have been telling a lot of audiences is, you have to survive this present time. The things I'm going to suggest to you take a long time to put in place. And once you survive this time, then it's time to focus on your culture and on your talent selection processes to get better talent and to keep them, because this cycle will happen again. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I told them, interestingly, was that, being in business now in the HR field for almost 40 years, not quite, but almost. I started really young.
We can round down if you want to. There's a certain time for us girls. We start rounding down.
Round down if we wanted to. But anyway, after all those years, it was the worst I had. This is the worst I've ever seen it. And so, while I have this formula and this blueprint about how to select great talent, when you need somebody on your crew tomorrow or an hour ago, that's not really helpful. And when afterwards, one of the women came up and she said, I just wanted to tell you, I really appreciate you saying it's the worst you've ever seen it, because now I know it's not just me. And she said, strangely, that encouraged me. And she said, but you said something else. You said, when this is over, make sure you're never in this situation again. And she said, that's what I intend to do. So my message to them was really about how to create a remarkable culture. And for me, that definition of culture is to have a meaningful purpose, a challenging mission, and demonstrated core values in your organization. And you start there, and then you select extraordinary talent based on their character, competency, and chemistry. And yes, you do those two things, and then you teach that talent how to create amazing customer experiences. And when you do all those things, you'll win the hearts of your customers or your patients or your students or whoever's receiving your work.
Wonderfully said. And, I speak as well, and I wrote 2 books, Solve the People Puzzle and Dare to Care. And, I saw this coming back in 2015. When did you see it start? Because everybody's blaming it on the pandemic, but it really started before that, don't you think?
I think so. The outlook for a shortage of talent long before the pandemic was
Yeah.
really clear to leaders that were paying attention. And the change in talent, the shift from baby boomers and even Gen Xers to millennials and then now Gen Z, I think precipitated, hey, you got to look at this differently. They're looking for different things. And so how are you going to adjust? So I think the pandemic, of course, just made everything so much worse, but it was not the precipitating event at all.
No, but everybody thinks it is. And I think that's wonderful that the person in the audience said, they don't feel alone anymore. There's a great hymn, You Will Not Walk Alone, that I think we should all sing in unison in the world right now. But it truly is, people are just dumbfounded by where are the people. There's 11 million jobs and 6 million people to fulfill them. And, one of our colleagues in the retention and recruiting industry, Josh Burson, mentions that we have to create candidates. Can you give me your perspective on creating candidates and how our listeners can do that?
Well, that brings a lot of ideas to mind for me. One thing that I just have a huge heart for right now is actually this Generation Z in the workforce. And I think it's a couple reasons. I think it's my role at High Point. I think it's because I have a son our youngest son just graduated from college. He's part of that generation. I've watched this up close among him and his friends. And starting right there in terms of creating your talent, I remember that I spotted a guy that was in the 10th grade when I decided he needed to work for Chick-fil-A, my former company. And I knew he wanted to be an engineer, and I went to our design and construction people and I said, look, there is a kid that you need to put your eye on. I mean, he's some of the best talent that I've ever seen. They thought I was a little crazy. In the 10th grade, I'm picking this guy out. Well, he graduates from high school. He's headed to Georgia Tech. And I encouraged them. I said, give him an internship. Go ahead, and because he's going to have all kinds of offers later in his college career. And if you'll go ahead and give him an opportunity, you're going to be able to attract him to this organization. Well, they did. And I think he did his before freshman year and definitely after his freshman year. And then, of course, he had some other opportunities. If I remember, it was Halliburton and UPS. And so when he graduated from Georgia Tech, he had a lot of opportunities. But he did come back to Chick-fil-A for his final internship. And I don't think he would have done that had they not been willing to give him a chance when other companies don't generally hire freshmen or, those who just finished their freshman year to be interns. So you've got to think differently. It's like, I've got to get them as soon as I can. I'll give you another example from my past. When I see Chick-fil-A operators who are willing to hire the 15-year-olds. Now, by the way, if you read my books, I don't really use the word hire. I'm doing that for your audience. I usually say select talent because I believe what you're doing is you're selecting talent, not hiring people. And so anyway, but when I see them select 15-year-olds, I know exactly what they're doing. Yes, it's harder because there's so many child labor laws along them working, but they're getting them attached to that culture early on so that when they do turn 16, they're already there, and hopefully they'll be loyal to the person who gave them a job when they were 15 when other people wouldn't. So to start with, you got to start really young. And if you're going to create some of your own talent and create those type of opportunities and grow them. Another organization that I know of, and I think it's a banking organization down in the bayou of Mississippi, they were having the problem that a lot of people are having of getting coders. And so they opened their own coding school, and they went there and they found young people that were very bright, but had no opportunity whatsoever to go to college because of their poverty level or whatever. And they got them into these coding schools, and all of a sudden they had all the people that they needed to code. And just this outside the box thinking of, how can I grow my own talent? How can I go identify people that really want to work but haven't had the opportunities, and think about this differently than the normal recruiting channels.
Absolutely. And, I see a thread through the stories you just shared. The difference is those people that you were just talking about, they were put first. Those organizations, your organization, the banking organization, they put those young, capable people first
Right.
and believed in them.
Exactly.
How important is that right now in the world we're living in, ensuring that people matter, and how do business leaders, I don't care what company you're running, how do they really put their people first? We've been saying it for years, right? People are your most important asset, but how do they live it? How do they walk that?
Well, I think the ones who are doing it successfully have figured out, and when I said I had a heart for this generation, there are three things that they desire. And so the companies that have figured this out are doing much better at finding and keeping their talent. And I'm going to tell you what these three things are. The problem is a lot of organizations are trying to do 30 things to attract and keep instead of focusing on the most important three. And what I've learned, the most important three, first of all, this generation of workers, they want to work for organizations with remarkable cultures, which is why what you said a little while ago, we saw the change before the pandemic because they were coming into the workforce and they said, it's not my mother or dad's company anymore. I don't want to just come here and work myself to death and get promotions all the way up. I want something different. I want to work. Culture matters to me, that people care about me. And especially that the organization has a purpose, because the second thing they want to do is they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. So they want to work with companies or organizations that have well-defined, meaningful purposes that they actually live out. And what that means is they don't want to just be in a company that gives away a lot of money. That's great. But they want to be hands-on. And so, for example, I saw this shift at Chick-fil-A. When I was there in leading talent, we had, of course, Chick-fil-A was known for its benevolence, especially for its scholarships for youth. It gave away, millions and millions and millions of dollars to all kinds, especially around education. Chick-fil-A, 10%, at least 10% of their income they gave away. But for the new generation employee, that wasn't good enough. It's like, I want to put my hands on these things. I want to be involved in that. So they began supporting things like Feed America, where when the company came together for a meeting, they prepared over 1 million meals. They packed over 1 million meals to donate to Feed America, for example. And that's the kind of things they wanted to be involved in. They wanted to be able to put their hands on that higher purpose. And then the last thing they're looking for is a leader that will invest in their growth and development. And that doesn't just mean a career path. Certainly they want that, and that's attractive when they can see that. But more importantly, they want a leader that truly cares about them and is looking out for their future and is making sure they get the skill enhancement and the development they need to grow. And so that, to me, those three things, if organizations will focus on that, that will tremendously help them in overcoming this deficit of talent that they have. People of this generation will be attracted to that.
Great points. And I don't know, Dee Ann, if you know, I have a son going into his senior year of school, so I have a fondness for this Gen Z population as well, and I love lots of them. They hang out at my house. So, a point you made that I want to emphasize is we do not hire people; we select talent. And I also often focus and emphasize to my audiences that people don't work for companies, they work for their families. So I'm intrigued by this. We select talent versus hiring people. Can you really expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Well, there's a huge difference between the two. And I really, my language is to select talent, because hiring people to me is about quantity, where selecting talent talks about quality. Quantity versus quality. Quantity is, do I have enough people to cover this shift? Do I have enough people on this project team? Do I have enough? Everything is about having enough, and they become just, I got to have a warm body. But selecting talent to me is competitive advantage, because it's about getting the right people with the right skill set and the right match to a specific role. And too often, The reason we don't do that, people say, why doesn't everybody just focus on selecting talent? Because it's hard. It's really hard. And a lot of people think they're just experts. They think interviewing is just sitting down and reading somebody's resume to them and watching them nod. And they don't check any references, and they don't allow the person the time to really investigate the organization. And then they have these high turnover rates because they're just hiring people. But organizations that select talent, they have a very thorough process of being sure to match the talent with the role. And they're not just making the decision for their own organization, but they're making sure that their candidate is well informed about the decision they're making to be part of the organization.
Absolutely. The road goes both ways, right? And, yes. They're selecting you, you're selecting them, and you're selecting a journey together. That's why we created precision interviewing for companies, because, people like you and me, Dee Ann, are trained on how to conduct a selection interview, behavioral-based interview selection, and to bring that candidate through that journey to make sure it's the best choice for them and the best choice for the organization. But so many hiring managers have a deficit. What do you suggest they do to get the people who select talent trained?
Well, they could certainly use your type of services
sure.
To get that training. But beyond that, first of all, both from an offensive standpoint and a defensive standpoint, it is not good for organizations to have people interviewing that are not well trained.
Exactly.
Offensively, they're not going to find the talent for you. And defensively, which sometimes can be worse, they can get you in a lot of trouble. So you want people who have the gift for it and are well trained for it. And so, one of the things I do in some of my keynote speaking and my training on a workshop that I give, if you can go in and just teach people how to appropriately conduct a behavioral interview, I really believe that the interviewing immediately will get better by about 80%. I just think it changes everything. In fact, I have a tool for your listeners. If they want to go to my website, which is Deann, Deann, Turner.com, they can download my top 25 behavioral interviewing questions. What's interesting about those questions is that that it also tells you what you're looking for in an answer. And so that those are great questions to practice with, which kind of takes me to my next point. As you know, to be a great interviewer, you just have to do a lot of it. And you have to be someone who listens, who asks the right questions, behavioral type questions, who knows how to, a skill I use, go 3 questions deep. Don't just ask the top question, but then what's the follow-up, the right follow-up question to that? And then the follow-up question to that, so that you've had a real conversation with somebody rather than just you've gotten blips of information. But if I asked you, Kathleen, to tell me about the most difficult project that you worked on, and then you describe that to me, and then I tell you about and then I ask you, what did you learn from that? And you tell me about some of the lessons that you learned from that. And then my next question is, what are you going to do differently next time? I have all this information about, and I could go on and on about that, like tell me the feedback your supervisor or the customer gave you and things like that. But you have suddenly you have 10 or 15 minutes worth of really solid information to help you make a good decision versus the way that people sometimes interview. So I think I think people don't do it because it's hard. They think it's supposed to be easy. They think anybody can interview. And so they don't really dig in and learn how to do it well. And once you learn to do it well, then it's actually fun.
Oh, yeah, it is fun. But what I see these days is they don't have enough inventory. They don't have enough choice. Forgive me for referring to people as inventory, but they really are. There's 11 million open jobs and 6 million people. So they're just hoping that somebody doesn't blow the interview. So the probing that you're suggesting, they're like, great, you sold $10 million, shake your hand, fog the mirror, and you're on board, because they don't have enough choice.
Well, and that's a little bit, again, I'd hate for anybody to have to make those kinds of choices, but there is a reality of where we are. But I also know, because I've been through these cycles 3 times in my career, it doesn't stay this way. It will eventually change. And whether it's a recession that changes it or, which, already it's an unusual one, as we've noted, because of the jobs available. But whatever the case is that changes, it will change. And it's during that point where people have to really get better at this and beef up their staff and prepare for that so that when the next cycle comes, they're in a much different situation than they find themselves today.
Totally agree. And of your 25 questions, what's your favorite?
Oh, wow. When I first started out, I'd have these gimmicky questions, like what TV character you most like? There's a Chick-fil-A operator in North Carolina. To this day, we have a relationship that I call him Andy because, and this was 30 years ago, because he said Andy Griffith or Andy Taylor in the Andy Griffith Show. So, but, I had those gimmicky questions, but then I realized they weren't very effective in making selection decisions. I think the most important question sometimes is to find out when people had real challenges. And I always like to ask them about the boss that challenged them the most and what they learned from it. Because I think when I look back at my own experience, I probably learned more, developed more because of the boss who challenged me the most. So that's my favorite thing to ask about.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, Dee Ann, we have to take a break. But coming up in the second part of my conversation with Dee Ann Turner, Dee Ann is going to share how Chick-fil-A embraces servant leadership.
When I was there, and I assume it still holds true, but when I was there, we had a saying, leaders serve. And the S is for see and shape the future. The E is for engage and develop others. The R is for reinvent continuously. V is for value results and relationships. And the last E is to embody the values.
This has been Dare to Care in the Workplace. To connect with Kathleen, go to KathleenQuinnBotaw.com. Kathleen's book, Dare to Care, is available wherever books are sold. Dare to Care in the Workplace is a production of Forbes Books.